My name is Dan Beltran. I am a campaign identity and branding logo designer with an emphasis in sports, and I also work with The Spot.
Hi, I'm Chrizzy. I'm a graphic designer and I'm part of the Spot staff team.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and kind of like what you do on a day-to-day basis. So who are you? Tell the audience who you are.
Well, I don't even know where to start. Day to day, I am currently working for a retouching studio that lets me work from home, and they are completely amazing. They're called Chroma Studios. They're based in Brooklyn, but right now, since the whole pandemic, we've been wondering if it's going to be more remote in general, since
Sure.
retouching is very hands off, unless you need physical proofing or
Right.
etc., which most of the time clients we print with another studio and then we do proofing through the phone or email, and then we send the proofs over. But basically, I have an office at home. I start around, it depends what time I wake up. Sometimes I start earlier, sometimes I start later, but usually we have different jobs that we're working on. We mostly focus on beauty and fashion, and right now we're working on a lot of beauty makeup work.
Right.
Mostly a lot of social media is coming out right now. Not as much campaigns because COVID.
Right.
So less availability of like bigger groups
Yep.
of projects.
So
Go
quick
ahead.
question, because you mentioned this. So I'm envisioning kind of like the Nike shoe factory, like 80,000, retouchers sitting in a warehouse, like getting the whip cracked, like, come on, we need 10 more photos before you clock out. Like, what does your team look like? And is it only photo retouchers or what is the deal there?
Well, it varies a lot in all the studios that I've been to. This studio in particular that I'm currently working with is extremely small. We're only 3 people. So right now we have 3 people, hired full time.
Sure.
There's my boss. We're all women, which is great.
Nice.
It's my boss, and then she's Anna. She's great. She's a head retoucher, and I'm a senior retoucher, also in the studio. And then we have a producer, which helps us deal with the clients and deal with proofs, and then and then there's also the people that I don't really talk to very much, which is our accountant and et cetera, et cetera. And then for everything else that is needed, we hire freelancers, and that's basically it. They just hired me recently in February, which is I'm very lucky because before that I was freelance.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I am very happy that I took the job. I took a slight pay decrease because I made a lot of money in freelance, but I just, something was telling me that I needed to get that job because freelance is great, but it's very stressful and anxiety ridden. I need a break. I want like a cushy job with great benefits and the really chill people. And this is basically a dream job because they're like, we don't like working if we don't have to, but if there's work, we'll work, But I have unlimited unlimited time off. I have, really, really good health insurance. I have, so many things. All the benefits are crazy. I'm very happy.
That's great. So Vianca, overall, how long would you say you've worked in the industry overall?
Overall, I've been retouching for, I would say, since I started school, I've been retouching for other people. So around 9 years now, I would say, give or take.
Gotcha. And speaking of school, what's your educational background? Is it what you did in school? It's what you did in school related to what you're doing now?
Yes and no. I first started school in Puerto Rico. I went to physics with a minor in electronics because I wanted to be an astronomer. And I've always loved photography, but I was really into astrophotography at the time. And, I was really into science, and my family has a very scientific background. So that's basically where I headed off to. But after a few years of being in school, of basically living in school, I was just, I can't do this anymore. And I love physics and I love astronomy, but I realized it wasn't for me. And then right on my junior year of physics, I took my first ever photography class. And the professor happened to go to School of Visual Arts in New York. And he told me, well, you're in the wrong major. You need to switch right now. You're a great photographer and you'd be wasting your talent if you don't leave. And I was already unhappy where I was. So I was just like, why not? Let's just change everything and move away, because I've been living in Puerto Rico all my life. I'm born and raised in Puerto Rico. And then, my life was in a crappy place. So I just decided to change everything. And then I switched majors to photography and I went to School of Visual Arts. So I thought I wanted to be a photographer for a while. But then as soon as I got to school, I very quickly realized what it takes to be a professional photographer. And it's just not me.
Not
In terms
fun.
of it's very idealistic, the way that they portray it to be in school. But once you start interning and then you start realizing what it entails, I come from less than we didn't have much money growing up. So to be a photographer, basically you have to upfront a lot of costs that I just didn't have. It just wasn't possible. Even in school, it was very difficult to go to school because most of the art school was attended by rich white kids. So it was very difficult for me to not only associate to people, but to be able to pay for the things that I had to pay in school. So I was just like, God, what am I going to do? And not only that, but I came from such a technical background that it was very difficult for me to, associate photography with that fine art aesthetic that people had.
Right.
And I think it was around first year I started playing around with Photoshop and doing edits for people. And once I started realizing how much I enjoyed it, because what I loved about physics was puzzles and trying to figure out certain things about certain problems. And I've always been really great at word problems. So once I discovered retouching, I was just like, this is the absolute perfect way to combine the technical with the art, and being able to visualize it a lot better than it's more objective than photography. Photography is so subjective, and everything's art. So
yeah.
it was very difficult for me to get used
to. Well, I'm really happy that you ended up where you are now, and you're really happy with what you do.
I love it. I edit a lot, and then after work I edit more.
Yeah, because you're just so passionate in it. Yeah, Vianca, you mentioned that you are in New York, and from what I know, New York has a very high living cost. Well, how was life in New York as a photo retoucher?
Starting out was pretty difficult because I didn't have much of a how do you say, I don't know how to explain this in English. I didn't have much of a
network,
financial blanket. So when I was in school, I had to work part-time. I worked at Outback and I worked at a couple of restaurants. So I was working part-time, going to school and doing internships. Oh, and by the way, I'm also a workaholic. I love working. So I've always had to work extra hard to be able to make money, especially here. But thankfully, my last year of school, I took an internship with a very lovely uh, studio called House Studios. And they hired me right before I graduated, which was insane. And I was able to start, earning more constant money doing retouching when I was working for them. But it was still like, a very junior position. And I still had to supplement my income doing freelance, which ended up being a very good thing because when sadly my job had to let me go because they were financially struggling, then I already had all these connects and all these clients to back me up when it happened. So it was very difficult starting out. But the more I put myself out there and the more people that I met, it started being a lot easier. And then once my portfolio started growing, it just, it was a lot smoother after that. But it was definitely a struggle starting out. I think in New York, when you live here long enough, you know the things that you can have and you things you can't, and you know where the deals are, and it's not as expensive as I thought it was. Because thankfully I have a really nice apartment for pretty cheap, and I have my own office, and I'm a little far from the city, but right now it doesn't matter because I don't even have to go anywhere. So I live in Brooklyn, and I don't really have to go to the city for anything right now. So it really worked out. I mean, my story is obviously not the same as a lot of other people, but I basically just, looked at the right places and did the right things as much as I could. And I worked really, really hard. When I was still in the first job and I freelanced, I worked around 13 to 14 hours a day, easy. Like I would work full time, and then after work I would work again because I had a freelance job, and then I would finish my freelance at like 2 a.m. at most, or like 12, and then do it all over again. So it was a struggle for sure, because New York is tough, but once I started meeting the right people, it started paying off.
Do you have a favorite retouch that you've done, or one that might look super easy, not easy, but you don't really realize the intricacies present within it that you're super proud of that people maybe wouldn't guess?
Well, my favorite one and the most intricacy ones are different. My favorite one is definitely the Pete Davidson one, because that was a very fun job to work on, and they gave me a lot of creative freedom.
Right.
And it felt really good because now I am at the point of my career where I can basically set my sights into something and I can accomplish it very well, especially when the art director sent me an attempt that he did, and I was like, oh boy. So the difference between what he did and what I did, I can even send you guys if you want what he sent me.
Right.
Because it's terrifying. It is very scary. But it was a considerable difference in quality. But that was a very, very fun job in general. It was, I'm sorry.
Go for it. I was just gonna ask, looking at this Pete Davidson series, I guess we'll call it, how much manpower goes into that? Is that like a 2-week thing, 3-week thing, more? Like what are we talking?
It's complicated because the photographer isn't a photographer, he's an actor, and that was his first time doing a photo shoot.
Okay, so you might have had to do a little cleanup on the back end
So
there, is what you're saying.
most of the things that were prepared by the lighting person and the art director, which
Yep.
and then the set design is incredible as well. They did a really good
Right.
job with that. And I think that the art director it's very important to have an art director that trusts people that you're working with. And I think that the way that I worked with him was very, very great, because he and I sat down and we discussed the shoot and how we're going to go about it. And they tried to shoot a few plates, basically images of dolls that they wanted to have the joints of, but they just didn't do it right. So I ended up having to crash one of their photo shoots and shooting dolls in a corner.
Wow.
That was interesting. And the whole thing was just bizarre, because in the meeting that we basically had it outside like a outside area in the hot tub yard section. And there's just a lot of people passing us by, and we're just like playing with naked dolls. We're just like, no, this is for art.
Right.
So it was interesting. But basically it took me around, some pictures took more than others, because they had a lot of they didn't have a lot of revisions, thankfully, because they were very easygoing and I understood exactly what they wanted. But for example, an image would take me 5 hours to do. And that's excluding, because they also wanted like some joints in the shoulder, not the shoulder, sorry, the arms, the elbows, that's the word.
Yes.
And then that just had to be cut out, because there was just, for the amount of time that they needed it was just not feasible. And we had to cut out the points that they wanted. But thankfully it worked out. They wanted a very plasticky look, and I combined a lot of the parts of the dolls with them. And then I also learned a few things about, shiny skin, making skin look more plastic.
Right.
So on top of that, they didn't want it to look extremely over retouched. So there was a sense of a weird, like creepy,
uncanny valley
sense of it. So it wasn't going to be this smooth plastic thing either.
Right. You nailed it.
Thank you.
I think you did very well. It looks super cool. So looking at that Pete Davidson piece, that must have been like super cool for you to do. Going off of that, who are some other notable clients that you've worked with, in your opinion, that you enjoyed working with?
One of my favorite ones that I don't think a lot of people know is, there's this V magazine cover, the V magazine with Sam Smith and a couple of his friends. That is all composites. Those are around 9 images together.
Wow.
Like his arm is composited in like the lady that she's like 4 images together. The guy on the bottom, I had to recreate his whole chest area. So like that is like at least 3 pictures together, because they just didn't shoot it much. And also the same thing with the wing image for the Italian version of it. That was a hassle, because they changed that composition a couple of times, and that was also all composited from different images. They're all multiple images together, because they wanted his face from another, his body from another, but they like his shoulder a certain way, or like the shirt isn't facing the right way, so it has to be another picture, and etc., 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 etc.
Wow, I would not have guessed that. I would not have guessed that at all.
Yeah.
I guess that's the mark of a good compositor, right? And retoucher, is that you can't tell what happened.
Yeah, that was one of the hardest ones, because that was early on. Well, not early on, that was 2018, but it was still like I hadn't done that many composites. And after that job, I made sure to like practice like crazy for more composite work because I did not want to suffer the way I suffered in that job. But that was also for another photographer who wasn't a photographer. He was a Lady Gaga stylist, and he also, that was one of the first times he had ever photographed, and naturally they give him covers, you know.
So, yeah, you don't work your way up to covers. That's just you start with. So
yes, I've done a couple of covers for people who have never held a camera before, which is that's it keeps reaffirming to me that photography I love, but I don't think I would enjoy doing it as a job.
Yeah, it's kind of scary, but
oh boy. Yeah.
I feel like it speaks volumes of what you can do and what your skill is too. Taking work that, you know, wasn't taken by a real photographer who doesn't know, you know, the skills or the techniques that you can you know, really show off your skill. And I guess it's really what's the word I'm looking for? I guess it really like makes you more proud.
It really does. There's a sense of accomplishment every single time I get a very difficult image. Like now I get excited when I get difficult things because I know that I'll learn something. That's what I love about Photoshop, is that there's a never-ending learning curve. Even if you think that you know everything, you probably don't. There's so many different ways to do so many different things. And since freelancing has opened my eyes to how everyone has their own way of doing everything, and everyone thinks is the best way, which is, you know, fair enough. But everything's different for a lot of people.
Right. So you use Photoshop a lot. Another question that I had is there ever any other programs you use a lot besides Photoshop if you do have to go do something outside of it?
I only use Capture One other than Photoshop because a lot of people do tethering. So, and a lot of clients like doing their own color work. So, you know, sometimes they'll do their own color work and then I just refine their color on top of, you know, I know the idea that what they're going for. So I just try to make it better on top of that, basically. But usually, you know, they'll have a certain color that they want, and then I'll try to recreate it in Photoshop through, you know, my own settings, and usually it looks better. Now, just Capture One other than Photoshop, it's basically, I would say, 5% Capture One and 95% Photoshop.
I know you mentioned a little bit about your job now, but can you go more in depth on, you know, what does a day on your job look like? So a day in the life with Vianca, what do you do?
Well, basically, in the morning, we have a Slack channel, and they usually message me with the kind of job that we have. They give me a brief explanation of what they need. Usually, it's like, oh, do we need to mask it? Do we not need to mask it? Is there a comp? Is there extensions? Is there like references? And then, you know, I start one by one, usually depending on what kind of job it is. If it's product, I usually start, you know, cleaning backgrounds, making sure everything's pretty. If it's extensions, I have to make sure that I have all the plates that I need, everything together. And then I have to, they're very particular with the way they build their Photoshop files. So I have to make sure that all the files are in the correct order that they want them to, and nothing's in the wrong folder, and nothing's turned off when it shouldn't be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And usually we work through Dropbox, and whenever I finish an image, I just drop it back into Dropbox. They review it. And if they, you know, they have any markups, or, oh, can you just fix this real quick? Or if the client has any changes, then they just, you know, write it out, and basically I change it and then re-upload it, etc. It's pretty straightforward depending on what it is. Usually beauty stuff takes a lot longer. So they would tell me, oh, this, we have a couple of beauty images. I need them back by, Thursday. And depending on how many I have to, make sure that I'm doing it in a certain amount of time. So I've had different studios where they're by time, but this studio in particular is by job and, by the amount of things that you do. So if there's extra compositing, then that's extra money. If there's extension, then they have to pay extra, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it depends if it's a lookbook or if it's product or if it's beauty. They're all treated differently. Like beauty is usually, takes longer, and then social media shouldn't take more than an hour and a half or even an hour, way less than that. So yeah.
So bouncing off, I'm going to ask a hard question here, so prepare yourself.
Of course, I'm prepared.
Bouncing off the beauty topic, I think you can guess where I'm going with this one. Kendrick Lamar said it best. I am so sick and tired of the effing Photoshop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you deal with some of the moral implications or the body image issues that can potentially arise? And do you personally, does it ever affect you?
That's a good question, because that's something that I might have a slightly controversial opinion about.
Sure.
Because I'm very much in the camp of, for my own work, I don't edit anything above what I would add if I had extra makeup or different lighting. Right. The things that you can do without Photoshop, I don't think people realize or understand the amount of production that goes into quote unquote Photoshopless images.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot of meetings with lawyers, with companies that try to push as much as they can to have the quote unquote less minimal Photoshop that they can get away with, while also saying it's not Photoshopped. I think it's more damaging when people say it isn't Photoshop than when it is, because people associate photography with reality. I think that right now in 2020, if you see a photograph, it's not real. I don't equate a photograph with reality. I equate a photograph with a representation of something. That being said, I do understand and I do agree that there are a lot of body issues when it comes to Photoshop, but I don't think it's anything new. I think that editing has been a part of photography since its inception. And I mean, you can even see in the Victorian era, they had corsets, but not only that, they also had Photoshop. There's a lot of images that you can see where they have these crazy waists, but what did they do? They just black some sort of stuff out in the photo.
Right.
Basically edit it out. And not only that, but paintings. They have smooth skin. They've always represented what their ideal of beauty is. You never will see any Renaissance paintings with, pimples and cellulite, and it just doesn't exist because it's supposed to be a representation of it. And I think that it's more damaging to associate photography with reality than not. That's why whenever I tell people, I'm like, if you see something, it's not real. Even it's very complicated to say, because a lot of people speak about photography, but not many people realize that video is very, very manipulated. And we used to work with a motion, a video retoucher at my old job, and he had a reel, and I saw all of the more like the most famous pop videos. He worked with really big name people, but all of the music videos that I recognize were extremely retouched, and I didn't know. I was just like, oh, it's a video. It can't be. But no, it's like insane, like tucking in stomachs, removing wrinkles, cellulite, everything. Even worse, because that is not talked about at all. I've never heard anybody speak about it because nobody knows about it. And it's crazy to me. I think that education should be a priority, and that people need to understand. There's a couple of accounts I follow on Instagram about that specifically, about, you know, body positivity and all you can accomplish. And there's a lot of accounts that I follow that show the dangers of nice lighting and posing. I think that is, to me, more dangerous than Photoshop, because Photoshop, some things are obvious. They're not real. You can't attain to it. But once you start being like, no Photoshop, no filter, then people are like, but she's beautiful. Why can't I be like her? She's perfect. But she's not. she's just really nice, soft lighting, and you can't, you know, see the things that you want to see. But it's usually just, you know, people need to associate photography with a representation of reality, not reality in itself, is what I think.
Good point.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I think in my job, it's helped me a lot with my body image, because every woman I've ever retouched has had a mustache.
Nice.
Every single one. Doesn't matter if it's a celebrity or not. I've retouched. What's her name? I have her here.
Yes, name and shame. We need it.
Margot Robbie. She is one of the fuzziest people I've ever in my life. The thing is, white women, especially white blonde women, have a lot of fuzz, and it's usually not noticeable if you're not close up, or if you're not, you know, you'll have a high detail camera. But the amount of fuzz that I had to remove from her was so much that I remembered it. Like, I still remember it later. And she had a mustache, but it's just blonde. You just can't see it. But a lot of the times people don't realize that these cameras that have such high definition have so much definition that even in real life people can't see the amounts of, you know, quote unquote flaws, because I don't think they're flaws. I think, you know, every person has their own unique look or whatever, I'm using it as an example, but they all have it. They literally all have it. That's one of my favorite things to do, is just to remove mustaches, because it's like, you know, I have one too. Everybody has one. But I feel that I wish that it was said more, that it was more obvious to people that it was not real. That's the, whenever I get asked that, I try to educate people in that. Don't ever think that anything that you see on social media is real, even if they tell you it is. Because you've seen it yourself. You can look at yourself in the mirror, and then someone takes a picture of you, and you're like, that doesn't even look like me. Because usually the way that we see ourselves in the mirror is directly correlated with our experiences and our perception of ourselves. So we'll never actually know what we actually look like. Because if someone else looks at you, you're going to seem different to them as well. So perception is very important, and that's why I wish to, you know, educate as many people as I can do that. Nothing is real. Everything is fake.
That's really cool that, you know, this is being brought to light, because that's the problem. I feel like that's a lot of the problem we have right now, is you see all these people on social media, all these influencers, and it causes a lot of like body image issues. So I'm glad that, you know, I feel educated right now, like, because sometimes because sometimes I would feel that way and be like, oh my gosh, these people are so perfect. So it's good to know that they're not.
Nobody is perfect.
I even have a mustache, right? Like I was saying that earlier. I was like, shoot.
Dance dash.
I was like, man, Margot's got one. I got one. It's all good.
Yeah, I mean,
embrace the stash.
People often assume because we're so oversaturated with images that this is a new thing, but societal norms in terms of beauty has always been a very central focal point of the identity of women, because even in the Renaissance, they all painted a very specific body type. It was supple breasts. They didn't like large breasts. They had
right.
slightly bigger hips because it indicated
yep.
fertility, but and skinny thighs. You didn't see no fucking Renaissance skinny thigh women. Like, that wasn't a thing because that's their perception of beauty. And of course those people existed, but they weren't represented either. And now, thankfully, I feel that we have more representation in terms of beauty everywhere, and it's more of a norm. And I think that's such a great thing. And I think that companies are starting, obviously some are more genuine than others, but some, at least, they're trying to show different kinds of beauty.
Yeah.
Right.
I was watching Hulu yesterday, and they've got this, it's like a Fabletics ad or something, and it's got, women of all sizes in their spandex. And I'm like, that's huge.
Right.
If you go into the mall and you walk by, I forget the names of the stores, like Mac or whatever the hell they're called, and you see girls with what we have come to know as flaws, but in fact, it's every girl who walks into the store, every 14, 15-year-old going to buy makeup they want to see themselves on the walls, right? And so I think it's huge to have that level of representation.
There's been a cultural shift for sure in terms of, because I think that is also because of social media, because now being a model isn't just people who get hired by agencies. You can have an Instagram account and be a model through Instagram. And you don't have to be tall anymore. You don't have to be skinny anymore. You don't have to be white anymore. You can be whatever you want to be and have a following. And it's the more, the internet has progressed, the more individualistic it's become. So now, even with photography, it's all about the individual instead of, a company, because you have to, sadly, a lot of people now need to have a following in order to do anything regarding, magazine work. Or anything really. Like, even I have a few friends, since I went to art school, I have a lot of other friends in other fields, and my VFX friend was telling me that they were only hiring certain VFX artists that had a certain threshold of Instagram followers for jobs. And it's like, what? Like, are you serious?
Yeah. Wow.
But it's changed.
I'm gonna go buy some. So, come on.
Yeah, it's honestly changed so much. And social media it's a double-edged sword, I would say, because it's had its great points, and then it's rocky, points.
Sometimes
it connects us and it pushes us away from each other.
I myself, and I don't do social media. I'm really bad with it. I'm really bad with Instagram. I only post like a couple of months. And I know that if I tried, I would do really well. But it's so
insufferable. You almost have 2,000 followers. You're not doing too bad. Let me just throw that out there.
Well, but honestly, I can't bring myself to promote myself. That's really difficult for me. I'm a very personable person. I love talking to people. I love teaching, but I just hate hey, can you guys check out this and this and this? Thank you. It's just like and subscribe.
Right.
I can't do it. I'm trying so hard though. I'm gonna start hopefully this. I'm almost done with the branding. I'm trying graphic design now. I'm trying my own branding because I have also an art server that I'm trying to promote, that I've been working on for a year.
Wow.
Yeah. I've
Link it.
basically
Let's go.
used it. Yeah, I basically used it as an art project.
I love
I'm
it.
trying to design it. I've designed it. I'm doing branding for it now, and it's gonna be different because I want to start teaching as well. I want to teach more Photoshop, and I want to start giving back because I didn't have a lot of help when I started out. It was all internet, and it was very difficult to find a community. But now,
Yep.
now I'm gonna make my own.
Gotcha. That's awesome. So, going off of that, what does the future look like for Vianca?
Well, I still don't know if I want to stay retouching forever. I definitely want to start teaching as much as I can, helping out people. I would like to get different skills in different things because knowing how the technology is advancing, everything is getting easier. So I need to be more multifaceted in the things that I know how to do because, one day it's going to happen where we can press a button and things can be retouched super easily and there won't be as much of a need.
Don't say that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's still going to, I think it's a long way before, artistically speaking, the decisions can be all left to a computer, but it's still very important to diversify the skill set in terms of, because I'm only basically just, retouching photography. I want to branch out to, doing a little bit more graphic design for myself in order to make things a lot bit easier for me. But also 3D modeling is very, very big. There's a lot of studios that'll, like, if you can do VFX in 3D, you're golden. You can make so much money. It's not even funny.
Yeah. Right.
Like a lot of the studios that I would freelance for would ask me, like, can you do VFX? Can you do 3D? Can you, and I'm like, no, sorry. And I'm like, oh, if you did, we would hire you in a heartbeat. But, I'm really good at what I do, at least in retouching. So they still hire me.
Exactly.
But
so
yeah.
So on the topic of retouching, is there where does one go for inspiration? Like, do you just go down to the local gas station and pick up 20 magazines and bring them back, or how do you find inspiration in that field?
I mean, not anymore. I used to do a lot of that. Now I follow a lot of friends. I thankfully now my friends have started to also be going in their own careers and branching out. And I also like discovering new artists. I love more art than photography in general. I think that art in general influences my photography. And I like looking at more, surreal work because my own work is very surreal. It's very it's been a very long time since I've had time to do any of my own work, but I love doing fantasy stuff and more, nothing based in reality. And I like, going off of more, abstract art than actual photographs. But thankfully through art school, I was able to get a larger sense of knowledge of artists out there, especially within photography. And I've gathered a lot of influences throughout the years. But right now, my main source of inspiration is my Discord because a lot of people have been posting a lot of really good stuff. So I'm very, very proud of all the stuff that I've gotten from there. And then through there, I've, been inspired to do my own things. Yeah, we have an RSS feed of all art related stuff. So I get to browse through. Basically, it grabs everything on Reddit that is art related.
Relevant.
And then just makes it into a feed. And I browse that a lot.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Right. And zoning in to that inspiration. If you want to learn more about something, what resources do you personally use? Do you watch videos? Do you do more research? Do you read books? What would you advise for people to do if they want to learn more about photo retouching and what you do.
Skin work is very particular because I was taught under the internship that I did, and that's the basis that I did. And my boss happened to work with someone that does tutorials for lynda.com. And lynda.com was bought by LinkedIn, if I'm not mistaken. So they have really, really good tutorials on skin retouching there. And one of the instructors there used to work with my previous boss. So I started learning through there before I got my internship. And that's one of the reasons I got my internship was because I kind of name dropped the Lynda, and he's like, oh, I worked with them, blah, blah, blah. So, so it worked out that I already had an idea of what the style that they did was already. But I think that is usually the best way to learn is there, specifically with skin work. Lynda.com is really, really good because they teach it a very specific way. They don't teach frequency separation, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, everyone has their own way of doing things and it works for some people, and I think that some people do really good work with frequency separation, but I don't particularly like the look of it. But he teaches a lot of different ways to use it. Basically, the more tools you learn, the better it will be to combine them later to different things. And other than that, I've just learned from practice. I think that practice is so important and so essential. It's basically, I've done this every day for 8 to 13 hours a day for 9 years. So
wow,
it's I have to practice.
Yeah, that's so admirable. So for aspiring photo retouchers, those Photoshop fanatics out there, what advice do you have for them?
Get your stuff out there and try to get advice from other people. Don't be afraid to message other people. One of the things that I've learned in school is that the best way to get what you want is to ask for it. And you would be surprised the amount of people, big names out there that will respond to you and will, give you their time and, give you advice. I've emailed a lot of different people and a lot of them surprisingly have emailed me back. And a lot of the clients that I've received, I basically just Googled their name or whether it be a photographer, producer. I mean, sometimes I would go like magazines and I would search who the producer was, or I'm sorry, who the editor was, and I would see like what kind of like, photographers they would have, or an agency, and check with the photographers and then email the photographers. And, it helps to have a good portfolio. It's very, very important to have a good portfolio and to be very specific. Like, for example, I like specializing in beauty and fashion, and that's all I have on my portfolio. And specifically editorial is what I have on my portfolio because that's what I want to work on and that's what I enjoy. If I don't have any product work on my portfolio because I don't like working on product work, so that's not the kind of jobs that I want to get, but I still would get it because I've worked with, a lot of studios. But essentially just, specialize in something that you like, figure out what you like, and then practice the hell out of it.
That's pretty much cool. It, right? Like there's no shortcut. No. It's just, you got to do it.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I love about retouching is that you have to be good. I know people, but if you're crap, you're not going to get anywhere because other people will depend on you to look good. So It doesn't matter if he's your friend, you're not going to give him your images because if he churns out a turd, you're not going to present that as your work. So that's why I love it because, it depends on how in your actual skill and dedication and hard work.
I bet. Okay, so two more chill questions. When you're stuck or you need a break, what do you do to relax? Do you ever experienced any burnout in your field? And if you do, what do you do to sort of like alleviate yourself and to get back into that mindset?
Man, I basically take a break, go out, take a shower, don't look at a computer for like 2 seconds, and listen to music, or just like I can't look at the monitor if I'm stuck. I mean, it depends what I'm doing. I've had some instances where I need to be just working on it over and over and over until I finally get it. Especially when I worked in my first job, when I was starting to learn. Now it doesn't happen as much, thankfully, because I've gone through a lot of a lot of the situations, and now there hasn't been many situations I haven't been in. So I think experience helps a lot with having less of those moments. But when I was starting out, it was a lot of hardships. But it's so great, the feeling that I get after I finally got it and I figured it out and it looks decent. It doesn't look horrible. I've had moments, because one of the most traumatizing things that I went through was I had to remove a palm tree in front of a building and it didn't have a plate. So basically I had to recreate the front of a building that I just didn't know what it looked like. And it took me so long to do. I still remember it. It was horrible. So I used to work for an architecture photographer, and architecture photography is one of the hardest things to retouch. Because architecture is like architects are very picky, very picky with some of their things. And that was
wow. And you mentioned music. So what's on what artists or bands are in your retouching playlist? Music that keeps you focused.
I am super into hip hop and jazz.
Okay, so we may be backtracking a little bit, and the questions might overlap. Okay. But I'm just gonna ask some different questions that we might have missed. How did you come across your current job, and what was the interview process like, if you did have one?
Sure. I knew these people from my first job at House, and the producer used to come to House to do proofs. And my first studio did a lot of printing. They did a lot of fine art printing as well. Which I'm so thankful I don't do anymore, because printing is horrible. So then I met her through there, and then when I started doing freelancing, I approached them, or I think they approached me. Yeah, I think they messaged me because they had learned that I was doing freelancing, and they knew my boss, so they needed more freelancers. So I started freelancing for them as well as other studios at the same time. So they liked me so much that they kept, calling me to keep working for them. And then they finally messaged me that they wanted to hire me specifically, because they had another retoucher who moved away. And then they just needed to fill that one spot. So thankfully they messaged me, and that they offered me the job. And at the time, I was freelancing so much that I was so exhausted from everything. And then I was just like, I just need constant work. And they, obviously told me that I could work from home. I don't have to go anywhere, and they gave me all the awesome benefits. I was just like, I'm sold. And then the COVID happened, so it was even better. I don't know what I would have done if I had stayed freelance through COVID. Probably would have had to eaten away my savings or something.
As someone who's freelance during COVID right now, I take offense to that.
Well, I'm saying it because all of my freelance clients kind of like disappeared.
Fizzled out. Yeah, no, I hear you. You made the right call in the long run.
I mean, at least for now, I don't know if I want to stay in, like I said before, I don't want to stay in retouching forever. I've always kind of wanted to go towards more producer, art director, since I've worked with so many of them,
cool.
and I know how incompetent they are. And I think it works. It would work really well if you have an art director that has a photography retouching background, because you can not only work with the photographer and one-on-one and know what they're doing and know how to do it, but you can also communicate with the post-production, aspect of it, and not be fucking clueless like most of like I've had so many discussions with art directors that just have no idea what they're talking about, and they end up just making everything so much more hard, so much more harder than it needs to be. It's just but I definitely think that I can do a better job. And they earn so much money. It's insane.
Yeah, art directors, that's the way to go.
Yeah. And I have friends that are already art directors, so I can get in through a lot of different areas. But thankfully I have a lot of venues that I can go on, and depending how my career goes. And right now I'm very much enjoying retouching. I just wish I could do more of it for myself.
Yeah. When you were doing freelance, how did you base your rate, and what are the factors that influence the amount you charged? Was it per hour or was it per image?
I did per hour. Well, it depends on the project, because there were some projects that were very specific and very detailed, and they knew what they wanted, so I could charge per image. But if I did charge per image, it usually is more than I would charge per hour. And that's why per hour is usually better for some people. The more fuzzy people, I would definitely do per hour, because the more changes that they do, the more time it takes. And for other people, it depends on the job a lot, definitely. But it's usually like, how much it would take for me to, pay my bills plus my time and the time that I've been doing it, and et cetera, et cetera. I raised my rate as well, because I started getting a lot of people messaging me for retouching. So I started out doing 50 an hour, then 60, then 70, and then went up from there. Then for some studios, I would also do a day rate and per hour, depending on the studio.
And that's, and this, I don't know if you found similarly, but you kind of, like, if it was the best agency in the world and they didn't want to take my rate, then I'd be like, okay, I'll come down a little bit, mostly because I just want to work with you guys, right? And so, like, I think in certain instances, you have to weigh out how valuable the connection would be versus...
That's true, yeah. I mean, I don't think I've had that recently. I think that starting out, that happened more often. But now I have a good enough portfolio that I don't need it.
Right.
Unless it's like something that I want to do, like you said. Like if it's a really nice job and it's fun and it's like, it would look really good for my portfolio, then sure. But usually it's like I don't budge.
That's a good point.
So Vianca, are there any people you want to shout out or spotlight that has helped you in your career that you've looked up to, or even like clients that you want to thank, or just highlight?
Definitely my first house studios was David Meow was my mentor for life. He definitely took me under his wing when I started out, and he taught me most of what I started out doing. He was very patient with me, and it was a little rocky because we had money problems, and that's why I had to be laid off. So it was a little tough for me when I did get laid off. But they've always been so sweet to me, and they helped me out later on, and I'm very, very grateful that I got to have that as a first job. And my client forever, Matt's Dick. I love him. He's great. I really like working with him because it's so much easier, and I know what he likes, and it's just easy to work with him. Sadly, well, I just recently did a job for him, but we haven't been able to work together as much as we used to. But I'm thankfully I haven't had, besides the ones that I told you guys about, I haven't had, crazy bad experiences. I've mostly had really, good people that I've worked for. Definitely Jonathan from Paper, or was it Paper? Yeah, Paper. He's that art director, the one with the Pete Davidson. He's fantastic. He's the best art director I've ever worked with ever. He's such a great guy. Like, and he had such a great knowledge, and it was such a great conversation. Probably the best conversation I've had prior to a job, in terms of being able to understand their vision and what they were going for, and what kind of color that they wanted. And he was very articulate in being able to say exactly what he wanted, which is not many people do that at all. Like, people are so vague with the things that they want. Like, most people are like, I want this, but no, I want this now, but now I want this, but now I want this. And they were very straightforward. He knew what he wanted, and it was really great. I really loved working with him. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you for your time today, Vianca. It was really inspiring, and I've learned a lot from you as well in this episode. And good luck with all your future endeavors. I can't wait to see what you create and what other projects you work on, whether it be photo retouching or your art. I really can't wait to see those. And thank you for joining us on this episode of The Spot.